Welcome in to Greenville Grit. This is Greenville Residents in Touch with your hosts, Terry Williams and Michael Overton. This is the show that keeps you connected and in touch with the issues that affect what's happening in your community. Greenville Grit is sponsored by Greenville Toyota, the Overton Group. And now, here are your hosts for Greenville Grit, Terry Williams and Michael Overton.
Good evening and welcome to Greenville Grit. I'm Terry Williams.
And I'm Michael Overton, along with our constant co-host, Dennis Mitchell, and a very well-known and respected Greenville resident, Terry Boardman. Mr. Boardman, thank you for being on with us today.
It's a pleasure.
We're going to have a fun time talking about city budgets.
That's right.
Isn't that exciting, talking about budgets?
Continuing conversation for quite a while, I think.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of things going on. And before we get into the meat discussion, we always have to thank the sponsors that allow us to do this show. We need to thank Greenville Toyota. If you're looking for a new Toyota or Scion vehicle or a new used car, or need your car service, go see Craig Gois at the Greenville Toyota team on Memorial Drive, or you can call them at 321-3000. Also, the Overton Group.
Overton Group. Thank you, Michael.
Real estate and property management professionals with an office here in Greenville and in New Bern. We do commercial real estate, leasing and sales, residential real estate, and business brokerage. And lastly, Ribeye Steakhouse.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, you said you went twice this past week?
I did. I went twice this week. It was really
for those
good.
of you who missed it, you missed it. 25% discount.
Times.
And I think
Salad
it may
bar.
still go through tonight.
All you women need to go over there and try that salad bar. It's great.
That's right.
It reminds you of the old Three Steers.
Well, Joey Wood and the Ribeyes crew have jumped on to sponsor us, and we appreciate that. So make sure you go back and return the favor by supporting them. We're going to take a 2-minute commercial break, come back. We're getting into the meat of the budget discussions.
The big one is on it.
Welcome back to the Greenville Grit. This is Michael Overton, along with my co-host, Terry Williams, our Greenville Gritter, Dennis Mitchell, and our Greenville resident in charge, Mr. Terry Boardman. We're going to get into a lot of discussion on the budget, some of the things that went around this last budget cycle, including 3 tax increases in a 45-day period. Only 2 went through, thanks to the state. One of them did not. But, Dennis, I'm going to let you take the first question, and let's get into this. I know. I'll tell you what, before we do that, Mr. Boardman, give us a background. I believe you were a former CPA.
Yeah, still a CPA. I was a consultant and a CPA for 35 years, traveled from Greenville all over the country. And then my wife asked me not to travel anymore, so I became a high school teacher, taught at D.H. Conley Accounting, taught at North Pitt Algebra. And for the last 7 years, I've taught at ECU and operations management, still teaching there.
Okay.
Great.
Well, I believe that definitely sets up the stage to solidify the fact that you understand the budget, you understand the numbers, and have spent a lot of time digging into them. So,
yes, sir.
Dennis, take it, man.
I think that's kind of what leads us into this. I mean, Terry, for those who've been privileged to be a part of the email chain, you've been heightening our radar, so to speak, on certain issues with the city. So let's talk about one issue in particular that I think has really raised the flag with a lot of us, is this idea of a $7 million vehicle replacement fund. Is that a fund, or is that fund balance? Should that be counted as fund balance?
Well, and that is a good question. Basically, the way it came up is that I started after the tax increase from 52 to 54 cents. I knew that was quite high, and I did some research and found out that Raleigh's tax rate is 38 cents, Chapel Hill's rate is 49, and 5 other cities that are very compatible to us are in the 40s. So I started looking at it because it certainly didn't make sense that we were at 54 cents and others were substantially lower, and like Cary, North Carolina. I mean, that's a good-looking city. Mm-hmm. And then I started looking at the budget, and I found monies that were in the fund balance and that really looked like they would be available for us to do some necessary things like street repairs. As I was conversing with the city manager, a number popped up, $7,300,000, and I said, just where is that number? And as I looked, I found it on page 174 of the financial statements, and I started inquiring about it, and it was a vehicle replacement fund that the city manager had put in there spendable cash. Now, I did know, and I looked it up, that the city only has $9 million worth of equipment, so I couldn't quite understand why we had accumulated $7 million in cash. And as I started to inquire, I started to get pushback from people who didn't want to talk about it. And as I inquired further, I found out that the fund started in 2007, and it was at $4 million. And these types of funds, according to the government, are supposed to go down until they just about hit zero. Then they come back up again when you put more cash in them. And then they go down again as you purchase vehicles, and they go back up. But as I talked to some government representatives up in Connecticut, this fund is not supposed to keep going up and up and up. And between 2007 and 2013, the account went from $4 million to $4.5 million to $5 million to $6 million to $6.5 million to $7 million to $7,300,000. And probably had I not caught it and talked to people, it'd still be going up.
Well, another year or two, we'd be up to the $9 million replacement.
That's right. We could
them all in a
replace
year.
every vehicle, couldn't we? But the upshot is that it's, in the conclusion of a number of people I spoke with, that account is overfunded by as much as $5 million. It does not need to be anywhere close to the $7 million. The manager tells me, the city manager tells me that the city council was aware of this fund, which was outside the typical funds. It was buried elsewhere, and was aware of the $7 million. That begs the question that when she brought the issue on the privilege tax shortfall to the board, that she did not say anything about taking money out of this massively overfunded account. She said either you have to raise taxes by 2 cents or we have to cut every specific amount, including the Shepherd Library, for $17,000. There was never any mention of this vehicle replacement fund, which most of the experts are telling me it's overfunded by as much as $5 million.
Well, I believe we also have had discussion, too, of the health fund and concerns of whether even that's overfunded to a degree. I've heard numbers up to $1.5 million of that being overfunded. So
that's correct. And quite frankly, this vehicle replacement fund number is so big that I haven't had a chance to look at what probably is another $2 or $3 or $4 million in cash that's out there that's just not.
So I have a question. So if that started in 2007, I think you said,
Yes.
and the fund's been building, has it been used at all? If it was, have we replaced vehicles
yes.
out of that fund?
Right.
Or were they replaced out of some other fund?
The only way that I can think it's growing as fast as kudzu grows is because what's going on is that they are budgeting a number of vehicles to purchase, for instance, the police department.
Right.
And that money is taken from the tax funds, put into this account, but when the police department comes to want those vehicles, they don't get the ones that are budgeted. They get something less. Maybe they budgeted 6, we put the money in for 6, the city says you only need to buy 3, that money stayed in that account. And after years and years of doing that, it keeps
builds
raising up. What should happen in that case, according to the experts, is that money should be refunded for other purposes back to the general fund. And it's not.
And it's not being done.
And that's where the $7.3 million grew to over 6 years.
So really, the $600,000 maybe shortfall could have been taken out of the vehicle fund, no tax raise, sit back, wait and see what happens towards 2016 when they reviewed the budget again, and then see if we needed the tax raise at that time. It doesn't sound like to me they would have missed the $600,000 out of the vehicle fund.
It wouldn't have skipped a beat.
Well, there's also discussion, I believe, in Calvin's newsletter, I know you read it too, had mentioned that they hope to consider taking a look at this next year and reducing the taxes. And I guess my argument would be, why are you going to pick an election year to now start talking about cutting the taxes that you voted to increase? And in saying that, why did you go the whole way if there was a concern of a shortfall, why not go halfway and say, all right, guys, let's look at this again next June.
That's
Let's
right.
see if we're
There was
making our
plenty of time.
shortfall or if we're in the positive. But it wasn't that. It was a quick knee-jerk reaction, and to me, an easy response. I don't know your opinion, but it was done too quickly.
Well, I mean, I think this issue really brings to light a lot of different things. I mean, we came up with a plan to fix our sanitation issue, but we stretched it out over 5 years because of the cost to buy new sanitation trucks. I mean, the way this is reading now, we had enough
had the money
to buy the sanitation trucks and cut that time to fix that program in half.
Didn't we borrow to buy those?
I believe we did.
We did. We borrowed to buy those.
So, I mean, this brings up a whole lot of issues. But I think the bottom line is here that the city council really did not need to raise taxes. And part of it can go back to, we said, the budget process that they used this year. They didn't really have the
didn't do their
opportunity
homework.
to get into those numbers and really look what was going on.
Well, I think another question too, Mr. Boardman, we can talk about the vehicle replacement fund, and I completely agree. I think it's completely valid, and that is a fund that continues to build, and no city should have almost as much money in the bank as it would replace their entire fleet in a year. I don't know what the average term would be. I would assume somewhere between 5 and 7 years.
10 years, believe it or not,
10
because
years?
those fire trucks last
That's
forever.
for the 10 years. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And that's where the big bucks are, is a fire truck will last anywhere between 10 and 15 years. And 15 years, they're still good. So, I mean, you're looking at police cars, which last 3 years probably. So, yeah, I mean, it's a hefty amount of money. As I say, a good number would be around $2 million.
Well, I think a turn into the discussion, Terry, would not be the vehicles themselves, but what the vehicles ride on,
They
and
have
that
to
will be the
ride on.
roads.
That's right.
Let's get into roads. My favorite thing, and Dennis, were you here last week? I can't remember if you were here last week.
Week
before
before.
last.
Week before.
Okay, that's right. Well,
You bumped me for the mayor.
I know we did. But one of the things you look better than the mayor.
I know I do.
You just need to get the little hair thing going on. But one of the things we had discussed, and thank you to requesting the breakdown of the roads. But one of the most interesting thing I found in the roads that were done is. Besides Red Banks and there was another major road, I already forgot the name
First
of it.
Street.
First Street. The third most pavement went to River Hills
River
Drive,
Hills.
which happens to be Marion Blackburn's neighborhood. So did you know
Very
that?
interesting.
I did know that we talked
So we
about
call
it
it
the week
Marion
before,
Gate.
yeah.
I think it's a good word for it, Marion Gate.
Blackburn Gate.
Let's get your thoughts on the roads and where we are on this.
The roads, quite frankly, and the status of them has been really one of my major disappointments, because both Max Joyner and others on the council worked very, very hard a year and a half, nearly 2 years ago, to get an allocation of $4 million to fix what the management, the city management said were 100 miles of bad roads. And so we thought that if we got $4 million, we could get up and running and start working on this. We had the gentleman from Charlotte, the assistant manager, Ron Kimball, come and say that Charlotte's roads are on a 25-year cycle. We're on a 75-year cycle, and that just caught my breath. But having been here 30 years, I can tell you that the roads in my neighborhood or leading up to my neighborhood haven't been touched in 30 years. So we worked very hard to get the $4 million allocated, and I haven't seen a lot of blacktop going on. Right. So I asked them for a status, and lo and behold, they've only spent $1.3 million on roads, and they've only done 15 miles of roads. And to me, that is a very big disappointment, because we need to catch our roads up, and our roads are in bad shape by their own volition. They said they're in bad shape. And it's really disappointing. So I know that there are some people, including a couple of you guys, that are going to be at this bond meeting tonight. And somebody is going to be asking for $12 million for roads. And I'm saying, if you can't spend the $4 million you've got in your pocket to get these roads started, why would you expect the taxpayers to approve a street bond issue for $12 million when you can't get what you've got? And I was hoping at this time, after a year and a half, that the city management would come in and say, well, we did 50 miles worth of roads, we've spent the $4 million. Do we have any more?
Right.
And I would have said to him, certainly, go into that vehicle replacement fund,
And get
take
your
out
money.
another $5 million and go to it. Unfortunately, that's not what's occurring. What's occurring is that they only spent $1.2 million. They've only done 15 miles worth of roads. And if you read my emails back to the city manager, I said, that's it?
Right.
That's what you've done? It doesn't take a PhD to tell you which roads are bad in
Right.
this city.
That's right.
Get them done.
Well, Dennis, I think you were on the city council during the time that money was allocated. Get your response
I
on
mean,
this.
I'm on the same page with Terry. I mean, that it really bothers me. You know, we were sitting in front of us. They even brought pieces of road in there and crumbled them up and showed them what will happen if we don't take care of these lane
Right.
miles right now. That they will move to failure, and they would go from costing $100,000 to repair to $1 million to repair per mile, I believe it was. So, I mean, it really bothered me that we have all this money there and we haven't used it, along with the $200,000 that we set aside to begin the design phase of South Greenville Gym. So, I mean, I don't understand, because once the city council, a new city council is seated, and you're in a new budget cycle, no one is beholden to what the last council passed.
Right.
So I think that brings in the picture. We're talking about the $7 million, this money for the roads. A city council can come in any time they want to and change direction and move these funds to whatever areas they want to. So the money is there. It's not like it's going to be our guys that are paving it. Put the contracts out there.
Right.
Get these roads paved.
Well, I
Well,
think
that-
that's going to be critical when we start discussing this with the bond. That number one, everyone's going to want to know what's going to be done first, what order will it be done in, and what time frame.
Exactly.
Before you can even
That's what I
think
wanna push
about
for,
getting
too.
another bond or a bond passed to complete what the $4 million is supposed to start, they're going to want to know if we're going to get it done in a certain time, and it shouldn't take that long. I don't
Well, I can
understand why
guarantee
it
that
takes
any
that
money
long.
left over by the time, if that bond passes, is just going to be switched over to another part of the
Can that be
budget somewhere.
done?
Yeah,
Well, what about
absolutely.
maintenance for the roads? We're going to repair them. We're going to fix, I guess, I don't even know if that money's going to cover the 100 miles. But then, look what's happened to us in the last 25 or 30 or 40 years of not maintaining them. So the fund needs to be, maybe some money left there to continue to keep the roads where they're
Well,
supposed to
and
be
that
once
was-
they're repaired.
That was one of Max Joyner's biggest caveats, is that power bill money. A lot of that money is allocated towards roads, but a lot of it is shifted to administrative funding.
Right.
So, I mean, that's the money that you're supposed to use year after year to maintain your roads. But
And that's
we,
federal grants, just to be clear to people
No,
who are
that's
listening
gas,
in. Or,
the
pa-
gas
that's
Oh,
the
the gas
tax.
tax to the
Yeah,
state.
that's the
Okay.
tax.
That's what that money's
Tax.
supposed to be used for, and it hasn't. It's most of it's going to administration. So, I mean, those are a lot of different things you got to look at here.
Do you know what the Powell bill funding is per year?
$2.5 million.
A year. Mm-hmm. So I wonder how much of that is going towards any road maintenance at all.
I don't know, but I can tell you that in the fund balance that I did a review of, the city manager came back and said there's $2.5 million sitting in that fund to use. So, I mean, we got the $4 million, less 1.2 plus 2.5. We've got $5 million that's available. What is disappointing to me is that when we talked about this $4 million, one of our purposes was to get out there and get these roads blacktopped. And that way, when a bond issue did come forward, that people in the neighborhood would say, the city is proactive, it's moving forward, we're doing things, I'm going to vote for the bond issue. Right now, in my opinion, I would not vote for this bond issue until I start seeing some blacktop laid on some of these roads.
Right.
And that is to me, it's just heartbreaking, really. And you say, well, how can you be heartbroken? Because our biggest assets are the hospital and ECU. And when these parents bring their kids to school, they drive on our roads. And if we have crappy roads, pardon the French, they are not going to take a good impression of Greenville
That's right.
home. And we need to have those roads in perfect shape. And if we've got the money, why we are not doing it totally escapes me.
Well, it probably doesn't matter now how we got to where we got and why was nothing done for all these years prior, but we can change that going forward, and I guess that was my comments. Let's leave some sort of maintenance money in there to help if we do have issues, so we don't get in this predicament again. But how many years are they predicting that it would take to get the roads to where all the roads where we need them to be that are our responsibility?
Probably 10 years.
Yeah.
And at $4 million a year, that's not unusual. And But it's like everything else. You got to start.
That's
Yeah,
right.
you gotta
Well, this
start.
$4 million and then the bond that they're projecting really won't be nearly enough to take care of what we really need to be
Well,
doing in 10 years.
If you start looking at other money in the budgets and you start setting your priorities, it'll go a long ways 5 years from now to take care of our major.
Right now, the problem is we're not
Right.
spending any
Not
of it.
spending
I mean,
any.
they spend
That's
a little
right.
bit and stop.
So the
Probably-
2.5, once the roads were in a certain condition, the 2.5 from the power bill should take care of, we should be constantly working on the roads.
That's right.
Constantly.
And we should be able to go from there in
Right.
good shape, just like Charlotte's doing.
Right.
25 years, we just keep going along. The critical point that we have to understand is that if we don't do it, it costs more.
That's right.
It's the old Fram filter thing. Pay me now or pay me later. And it's the same thing there. If you don't do the roads now, you're in trouble.
I'll tell you what, we're going to go back in and take our last commercial break, come back, and we're going to talk a little bit about fund balance. We'll be back in 2 minutes.
And we're back again. We're going along with our discussions we've been having on the budget. We have Terry Boardman here. Terry, we're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about the fund balance. As you know, there's been a lot of talk about what our city's financial health is related to our fund balance. What are your talking points on that?
Well, there's been a lot of talk by certain council members that our fund balance is in jeopardy, that it's low. And I couldn't reconcile that in my brain because I did know that we have $49 million in cash in the bank. And as I started to look at it, I started to see where our fund balance is extremely healthy at $31 million. Well above the $11 million that is necessary in order for us to maintain a safe environment. So we're a good $20 million higher than what our 14% limit is. So the fund balance issue is kind of a moot point. We're highly taxed in this city, and we pay a lot of fees, and we are financially healthy. The real question is, why aren't we getting the services that our taxes pay for?
And I think that's the big issue,
Yes.
Terry, is that when you look at the financial health of the city, you also have to look at the assets that you have. If we have a huge backlog of maintenance, we have road issues. How can you brag about having so much money in the bank when your city is crumbling under you?
That's exactly correct. Our infrastructure is not good. And I think it's just a matter of priorities at the city council level. And what I proposed, which has gotten nowhere over a couple of years, is a finance commission that would be comprised of CPAs, lawyers, housewives, house husbands, business people. If we can have a bicycle commission, we can have a finance commission.
Have any other cities around North Carolina that you're familiar with, do they have finance commissions?
They have finance commissions. They have, they call it different names, but finance committees. And what they do is that they review the financial statement. The $7 million that I talked about, this group would be aware of that number and could go to the city council and say, before you raise rates here, let's take a look at some of the
Right.
other dollars. They would read the consolidated financial reports. We have a lot of sharp people out here. We've got a university with tons of financially astute individuals. We have a highly educated workforce. I don't see why we don't have a finance commission to do that.
Well, Mr. Boardman, thank you for coming on. We're wrapping our show up. Terry, you got anything in
Really
closing that you wanted to add?
appreciate it. I just think my grit would be they just rush to judgment and rush to action without doing their homework.
That's
I
right.
think it's agree. Thank you again to Ribeyes, the Overton Group, and Greenville Toyota. We will see you next Wednesday. Be sure to tune in if you miss us tonight, Saturday at 9:30, or even this Friday at 6:30. Until next time, we'll see you next week.